What's up YouTube, this is Tubedigga. This video is a complete beginner's guide to clip programs. I've already covered drum programs and key group programs. If you haven't seen those videos, please do go and check those out. For this video, we're going to look at clip programs. The first thing that I want to mention about clip programs is the big issue that everyone has with them, or seems to have with them, is that if you trigger a sample and then switch to a different track, the clips will cut off. So I'll just do that now as a demonstration. And your clip cuts off. So that doesn't really make sense to me, because clip programs have kind of been promoted as live performance programs. And how are you supposed to trigger those samples, let them run off in the background, and then go to a drum program or a key group program and jam your other sounds over the top? You can't do it unless you've got your clips being triggered by the actual sequencer, which kind of defeats the object of it being a live playback program type. Okay, you've either got to add them into the grid editor here, or the step sequencer, or just live record them in as you would any other notes in a drum program or a key group program. But in typical Tubedigga style, I'm not going to let that hinder me, and I do like clip programs. It's forced me to think about the best way to use them. You've got to think that clip programs have got a total of 128 possible samples that you can load into them. You've got 8 banks of 16 pads that you can occupy with all different samples, whether they be one shots or loops. So the loops can be all in sync with each other or not. And also you can just live jam pads that aren't set to a particular quantization launch mode, and just jam those pads over the top of your loops in the same way that you would in a drum program. So for anyone wanting to use clip programs in a live set scenario, I recommend you just stay on one track and use your one clip program. Don't switch sequences, don't switch tracks, just use this one program and work hard at setting that program up for that particular set that you're going to play. Okay? It will work just as well as doing it any other way. In fact, it might even work better, because it will force you to think about all the samples, be selective with those samples and how you've got them set up in this one program. You won't have all these other programs and sounds to worry about. You can just launch everything from this one program. Let's go and look at my actual clip program to show you how I've got it set up and how it can relate to your own projects. So I'm going to press menu and go to program edit. Now, the first thing I want to mention with the clip program is that if you press and hold shift, you can select any of the different pads without triggering them. This is really handy if you just want to edit any of these different pads and not start or stop any other of your pads, okay, or your clips. So that's just a good little tip there. Press and hold shift and you can switch to any of the other pads. Now, this section here allows you to control the entire pitching, or the semitones, of the entire program and the fine tuning, and you've also got the global launch quantize settings here. So you can have that set to off. So that would be good if this entire clip program had all one shots and you didn't really want to trigger them at a particular synced time division. You can have it set to 8 bars, 4 bars, 2 bars, 1 bar, half a bar, quarter bar, 1/8 bar, 16th bar, 32 bar, 64 bars. You can't launch Mars bars from the MPC Live because that's a chocolate bar. That's what that does. Up the top here, it's pretty much the same as the other program types. You've just got this identifier to show you what program you're using. You can edit your current pad, multiple pads, or all pads. So this up here just shows you the sample that's loaded to the current pad that you're focused on. So I'm going to press and hold shift again, and you'll see those samples jump and correspond to whatever pad they're loaded on. Up here is your read and write automation, okay? And this one's a bit of a strange one. I don't know why we have got access to this here, because auto scroll, basically, let's go back out and look at the grid editor. That function is also available here, and it allows you to follow the sequence. So the view of the sequence will just scroll along, or it will just jump. If you've got it set to page mode, it will just jump when it's reached the end of this page, and it will switch to a new load of bars that were currently off screen, or previously off screen, should I say. So I'm not too sure why we've got that in the clip program, because it doesn't work on samples. If you've zoomed right in and your clip's playing back, it won't scroll along like that. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but I don't really know how that relates to clip programs. And up here, you've got your system resources as shown in my other videos. You've got your battery usage, CPU and RAM, and you can purge your samples from there as well. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to show you how I've got mine set up. So I've got mine put into columns. You can do it in rows or any which way you want, okay? But this is how I've got mine set up. So in this first column, I've got musical loops, or at least the first three, this Serum clip, Jazz Vox, and this Primitive L clip. These are all loops. This top one is the only odd one out in the entire program, and that's a one-shot sample. Okay, so I can just jam that sample over the top of any other loops that are playing at any point in my sequence. It's not synced to anything, and it is just a one-shot sample with an effect on it. But these three here, these are all set to the same mute group, okay? So these are all set to mute group 1. My second column are all bass sounds. They're all set to mute group 2, so they'll chop each other off because I don't want them playing over the top of each other. So because these are different mute groups, I can jam the musical sounds over any of the other bass sounds and vice versa, okay? The third column are all breakbeats. They are all set to the same mute group, but this fourth column are also other additional breakbeats, and they're set to another mute group 4. So I can jam breakbeats over the top of these other breakbeats, whichever ones, okay? So they're all interchangeable because they're set to different mute groups, but not in the column themselves. So I'll just show you a demonstration of that. So as you heard, these will play over the top of these, but these won't play over the top of each other, and neither will these play over the top of each other. That's how I've got mine set up. Now let's go to pad, and now we can view each individual pad in the same way that we could view each individual pad in a drum program. So again, if I press and hold shift, I can jump around all the different samples that I've got loaded in to these different pads. Now let's go through each individual pad. So my first pad, A01. Now, obviously this is your sample view. Now, this is a loop that I made in Serum, which is like a wavetable synth VST plugin that you might have heard of. Now, I've currently got the pad play mode set to toggle. We can set that to one shot or toggle, and that's the same for all pads. They're the only two options we get. But they're the only two options we need. So toggle will just play this back as a loop. I can start it from the pad and then stop it. So I'll just trigger it now. And that will be triggered every 1 bar. Let's now set that to 2 bars. I'll trigger it again. I'm going to press the pad. You can't really see me doing that, unfortunately, but it will only trigger again every 2 bars. I'll have to wait until it's, played through. It's a 2-bar loop as it is. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And there you go. That shows us the actual loop there. So this is 1 bar of it, basically, and that's the entire sample, which is 2 bars. Okay, so if I now set that to, let's say, 16th bars, I can toggle that on and off at a lot higher time division. In fact, let's play in context over the top of a breakbeat. So it's off time because it's set to 16th bars, and obviously it will make it even more off time, or I've got to be even more precise when I trigger it back, the higher the pad quantization is set to. So I've got mine currently set to 1 bar, so I can trigger it exactly at the same time as one of these breakbeats. Okay, so that's how you would trigger your samples to be in sync with one another. So I'm going to stay in this serum clip. Now, this is quite a good thing to do. You can adjust the start and end points. Okay, so I'm now going to half my sample. Okay, you can pretty much get that dead on if you zoom in. Okay, now it's just going to play half of this back, so that's just going to be 1 bar of it's going to play back, and it's going to loop over. Likewise, if I shorten this to just pretty much 1/8 of this, it will loop over accordingly. Okay, so that's another way that you can use your clips. We can also go up to here, which would be 1/4 of this loop, or you could have it in a kind of odd playback position. So that's kind of similar to what I described in one of my other videos with polyrhythms and track lengths. So you can actually create polyrhythms by adjusting the start and end points of your samples. Okay. And obviously, again, it helps that the clips that you're using are actually pre-prepared to actually make sense with the other clips, so things don't get too messy. Let's go up to my top pad. So this is the 1 shot, so I've not got that set to any quantization. I could have it set to a quantization, even though it's a 1 shot. At the moment, it's a 1 shot just so I can jam this pad over anything at any time. So you can obviously live jam your samples from different start points and adjust those on the fly. When you've got it set to off, that's what I would recommend if you just want to jam your pads in the same way that you would do in a drum program. We can reverse the sample. So down the bottom, we've got the semi-tuning for each individual sample. Now, again, I don't use this particularly, but it would be good if you could take it down an octave. So now that will still be in sync, because it's just going to be double the length, but obviously the pitch is going to be a lot lower. I need to actually put the quantization back to 1 bar. And of course you could go all the way up to plus 12 semitones. So you've got fine tuning for it there. So if it was a 1-shot sample like this one up here and you just wanted to tune it, you can use the semi-tunes and the fine tuning. This is all dependent on whether you've got it set to warp. I will just show you one demonstration of warping. So I'm going to play one of the breakbeats back. So I'm going to choose this pad here with a version of the Funky Drummer breakbeat. Now let's put warp on. And now you can hear it jumping slightly. The reason for that is because it's calculated the BPM as 175.93. I actually processed this breakbeat at 176, but I imagine where it's just been edited slightly incorrectly, the MPC Live is viewing it as 175.91 and it's got that jump. I just need to find one that is perfectly, well, it's done it to all of them. All these breakbeats are actually bounced out of the sequencer, so I've not actually edited them. For some reason, it's calculating them at a slightly lower tempo, but I found that even if this breakbeat was exactly 176 and the MPC Live was viewing it as 176 BPM, when you switch warp on, it does do something a bit odd to the attack portion, and you can slightly hear, just ever so slightly, a textural change in it where it's put it into warp mode. Obviously warp mode, I'm just going to do it anyway. I'll trigger this back and I'll change the pitch. Now, as you can hear, the higher pitch samples don't sound brilliant, but the lower pitch ones sound pretty decent. I quite like that being played at a lower pitch at the tempo that we're playing at. So let's just trigger that again. Roughness! Shut up, scissors. Anyway, there you go. So that's warping kind of covered. I'm not going to go heavily into it, but you can get some nice effects, particularly when pitching down, but pitching up, that's when things start to sound a bit grainy and weird and wobbly, and I'm not a massive fan of it. Down here is where you set your mute groups. So I'm going to press and hold shift again and go through my different columns. So this is pad A01, that's set to group 1. I'll go up through the pads, pad A5, 9, 13. Apart from 13, as I said before, this is a one shot that I want to jam over everything else, so it's not set to a mute group. My second column is all the even numbers, 2, 6, 10 and 14. They're all set to the same mute group, as are my third column, mute group 3. So I've just corresponded the columns, column 1, 2, 3 and 4, to the mute groups. And then we've got our fourth set of mute groups in our fourth column, so I can jam these over, you know, everything else pretty much, and they're separate. As with drum programs, you've got 32 different mute groups. So let's just do that. I'm going to trigger this one, mover, which is on pad 16, and I'm going to trigger this think break, which I've called Collins, Lynn Collins. Then I can switch one off and then jam another one from column 3. Okay, so I hope that gives you a good idea of what you can and can't do within a clip program. Now I'm going to have a little jam on this so you can hear it all in context. As said, I'm only occupying my first bank of 16 pads. Okay, look, these are all empty. So you've got 128 possible samples that you can load into this and set them up to be one shots or loops, all with different pad mute group settings. Obviously, I'm only using 4 mute groups at the moment. So that's all the options pretty much covered in clip group editing mode. I would prefer you guys to play about with yourself to see how the pad quantization behaves with different lengths of samples. So I'm just going to jam these pads back and show you how it all behaves. I'll go back to this screen so you can see those pads being triggered. Okay, so not the best set in the world. Some of these breaks, because they are not following exactly the same pattern. So if you listen to this Sesame Street break, it's pretty much the same pattern as this mover break. It's got that second snare on the offbeat. So let's play them together. So they play back quite well together. If you listen to the Lynn Collins Think break down the bottom here, it's a slightly different arrangement to these two breaks and some of the others, even this New Orleans break. Okay, that one jumps back towards the end with the snare offset. So these two together aren't the best options to play together. They're not too bad, but obviously you get a bit of a clash. And that would be the same if you programmed your breaks in any other way within drum programs. But I just thought I'd mention that because it did start to sound a bit messy towards the end there. Make sure you set up your loops and you know which ones you want to play over the top of each other and the ones that you want to cut the other ones off with, because it will make all the difference when you go to play your live set. And you know, obviously you want things to sound as precise and as cool as possible. Now, another thing that I think is worth mentioning is, of course, we've only got access to these two tabs here for the editing of this clip group program and the individual pads. If you want to add filters, you will have to do that by using insert effects. So you go to menu, go to your pad mixer, and this is just showing us exactly the same pad layout. But if you wanted to add a high pass filter, you would have to do that via an actual insert effect. Of course, you can still route the outputs of all the individual pads. So if you wanted to route all your bass sounds, you could have them coming out of your auxiliary outputs 3 and 4 or 5 and 6 from the MPC Live, or the additional ones on the MPC-X. And of course, you can send an amount of an effect from one of the returns. So let's go out to menu again, go to channel mixer. And on my returns, I've got this delay analog sync, which is one of my favorite delays to use. That's being sent from return 1. Okay, let's go back to the pad mixer, and then I'm just making sure I'm in send mode. We're on the first return. You can flick between the different returns, but I'm just using the first one, and I'm sending quite a lot of that, plus 1.66 dB of that to this pad. So even though you're going to be using up a bit more CPU because you haven't got the filters that you would have in a drum program, you can still add effects and filter stuff and do all that lovely stuff just by using your inserts. Let's go back to the program editor. I didn't cover fade actually. Fade just adds a short fade in and fade out to eliminate any potential clicks. I'm not going to show you an example of it because I tried it earlier and it didn't seem to take much of an effect, but I do think it's dependent on the content of the sample that you've loaded into a particular pad. So like I said at the start of the video, you can of course launch these just from the sequencer. You can either live record them or actually put them into here in the grid editor or in the step sequencer. I'm going to press and hold shift. I'm going to select the pads. Okay, so now you can see it's not triggering the pads back because I don't want to really hear them over the top of me speaking. So I'm going to select my first break beat, which is that think break. I'll put that on bar 1, step 1. Now let's press and hold shift again. I'm going to select pad A07, which is in that other third column, which is another sample in the third column, and I'll put that on step 5. Press and hold shift again. Pad 11, again in that third column. So these are all set to the same mute group as I showed you before. Put that on step 9. Press and hold shift again. Select pad 15, which is the very top break beat, the Sesame Street break. Let's put that on step 13. And now let's go out to the main page. Let's just loop round bar 1 so we can just hear that. So now it's cycling through those clips. So the step sequencer doesn't allow you to adjust the note length. Let's go now to the grid editor, and as you can see we've still got those same notes, and that's why it's just playing that first beat of these individual clips. Okay, so if I grab those, all of them, and then choose edit end and then turn my data wheel, it will elongate all of those notes, and now they will play back for as long as the next clip is launched because they're set to the same mute group. So this is another creative way that you could use your clips, is because you know all these breakbeats are in sync with each other. You could mix and match and put all kinds of different notes, different lengths, and really chop between your breaks just by playing around with the step sequencer and the grid editor and adjusting all the note start and end points and things like that. You can also transpose those, so you can do that on the fly, so it's going to trigger back some of the different samples now. This might get a bit messy, but let's just take a look. Let's select all of them again and play back. So I hope you get the idea. You could do some quite interesting stuff with that if you really thought about where those loops fall in this sequence and how they're set up with the mute groups and how they chop each other off, etc. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, guys, and it gives you a thorough idea of how you can use clip programs in your own live sets or in your own projects. Please like, subscribe and share. Any comments or questions, please put them down below. Please do try and support me on Patreon to help me to continue do these videos for you guys on YouTube. You can just contribute $2 a month, which is less than the average price of a coffee. That will make all the difference. In fact, if every one of my 1,100 subscribers gave me $2 a month, how much money would I have per month to help me not have to do any other jobs and provide these videos and make them even better for you guys? Quite a lot of money, actually. But of course you don't have to do that, and you can continue to access these videos for free. So that's it, guys. Stay tuned for MIDI programs. I will be uploading that soon. I will see you on the other side. This is Tubedigga, and I'm out.